Welcome back to Liberty Perspective. I'm Joe Marshall. I'm going to be continuing for this show and probably the next, at least one more show after this, to wrap this up, to try, because I've been documenting and I've been showing you, if you haven't watched the last couple shows that I've done on Soviet era virology, I've done a show before on it too earlier, past few shows ago, but what I've been showing is basically in documenting how the biggest advance in probably socialist communist revolution on the world stage has come under the guise of public health. Public health is probably the biggest advancements in revolutionary collectivism, the biggest advancements in world socialism, and the fundamental transformations from what was left of a Western free world and a free world to the global governance of a communistic world, of a collectivist world, and in the evolution of human society towards that, basically the end goal of world socialism of a single global human organism. It's throughout collectivist doctrine, throughout collectivist socialist doctrine. It's the objective, okay? The final objective. And if you can know that, then every step in the direction that we take, every step in the direction that we take will start to make sense to you if you understand that each step in our fundamental transformation is towards that end goal of a single global human organism, like some giant beehive or ant colony or something, has one queen, one king, or table of planners that has control of, command and control over everything and everybody that happens in society. Everything we know. So this is where we're at, and this is where we're basically going. And I just wanted to tell you that public health has been the area where the largest advancements in that revolution, the greatest leap forwards in world socialist revolution, has happened under the guise of public health. What they refer to as the systems approach. The systems approach. Just go back into the 1950s. Okay, it happened in the 1920s, the 30s, under communistic or Eastern Bloc, even Soviet, countries or whatever. They had complete command and control in their public health, and they have certain things under public health, and under collectivist society. What public health is what public health has become today. It's the same thing. What they call the systems approach. In the time of polio in the 1950s, of course, we had, they couldn't test. This guy Sabin came up with this polio vaccine, is the oral polio vaccine, right? There was another guy by the name of Salk had an injected vaccine that they got approved in the United States, and Sabin couldn't really test. They couldn't test the vaccine over here. They couldn't do it. But what happened is this guy over in Russia, okay? This guy over in Russia named Mikhail Chumakov. He was, working under Stalin, right? Or just post-Stalin. I think it was 1956. I don't know when Stalin was. 1953 when Stalin. I don't know when was Stalin done. But anyways, it doesn't matter. 1956. This guy Mikhail Chumakov comes over to the United States with his wife. Cold War kind of a thaw in Cold War sentiment, because they had common enemies supposedly in polio. This guy Sabin, of course, there's another guy, Hillary Kaprowski. He was working on one too, right? And I guess he tested his in Poland. He also Ireland. He tested them out on, he tested them out on himself and his family, which a lot of people hear about. He tested his vaccine, oral polio vaccine, out on himself and his kids. But a lot of people don't hear about is that, he also tested them out on a bunch of mentally retarded kids at some state school in New York State. Yeah, volunteers. But anyways, they're all Eastern Bloc communist countries, okay? Socialist countries, if not communist countries. that had command and control over their population could mandate mass vaccinations, simultaneous mass vaccinations, because everybody's already drinking the Kool-Aid on the social contract that you really, if it's deemed what's best for the collective, you do it. Nobody even really comprehends the concept of, the integrity and value of the individual. It doesn't matter. The moral thing for an individual, and the only reason why an individual even exists, or if an individual is recognized at all, other than a meat suit, right, for the advancement of the genes, is the moral thing is to just throw yourself under the bus for the good of the collective, and that's really the only reason why an individual exists, anyways. But it's a mindset. It's a mindset, and it's a mindset that during Sabin and Chumakov got together, Chumakov came over to the United States in 1956, and he came to visit the Salk guy, but in Pittsburgh, but he also visited this guy Sabin. His last name was Sabin, who came up with the oral polio vaccine. It was supposed to be a shedding vaccine, I don't know, a self-perpetuating vaccine or some shit. One of the first ones there that did that, right? But anyways, all this comes together under the same, virology that was established by this guy MP Chumakov years before, when they had he was on some kind of mission under some other virologist, when Stalin sent him out to investigate what they would later determine was tick-borne encephalitis. And I went over this in another show, Coerced Soviet Virology. I did a show on it already on this, and kind of established the false premise upon which all that was established, which was the foundation of virology as we know it today. It's the foundation of epidemiology as we know it today. It's the foundation of zoonosis as we understand it today. Jumping, emerging virology and all that shit, right? It's the false premise for our understanding of everything we know in those things. It's the foundational premise from which nidality arose. They call it nidality, which eventually evolved into what they refer to as one medicine. Veterinarians got this one medicine thing going. It's kind of getting into this global governance shit, right? The internationalists of science, right, and the cosmopolitanism, they refer to it back in, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, the word for internationalism was cosmopolitanism and, citizens of the world shit. But this is what kind of transformed into, like I said, nidality, which led to one medicine, which we know today as One Health, which basically rolls all the tenets of revolutionary world socialism codifies it into overarching global governance health laws, which basically makes it, not basically, but wholly makes it, fundamentally makes it legally illegal to push back against the revolution on the world stage. It's crazy, but that's where we are. But when these polio vaccines that were happening under Chumakov, that Sabin's vaccines were being tested under Chumakov, I'm going to be going down through and showing you the documentation on this shit. I'm not making this shit up. They went from, just millions instantly, tens of thousands, then instantly to millions of people, and up to 90 million people eventually, maybe even 100 million or more, whatever, were getting these vaccines, and they were getting them, pretty much simultaneously. That Sabin, the guy who came up with them vaccines, that oral polio shedding vaccine, right? He was still pushing for simultaneous vaccines around the world to get these polio eradications. As a matter of fact, all the eradication movements for any emerging virus or whatever pathogens, zootonic jumps, and endemic viruses, okay, that have been in these societies, they want to eradicate is the word. And the only way that you can really eradicate is if you have the command and control to mandate everybody in society gets the vaccine, and that no child goes unvaccinated. No child goes unvaccinated. No person, that they say should get it goes without getting vaccinated, and that's vaccine equity, vaccine equity of nobody goes without getting vaccinated. But the thing is, under that system, which became the envy of the world, because they couldn't have tested Sabin's vaccine in the United States like that, especially when you learn that the trials that they were doing, it's documented that there was no control group. And who's gonna put the narrative out there other than what Stalin or Lenin or Gorbachev or Khrushchev wanted? You know what I mean? And the conditions under which all these, tick-borne encephalitis was so-called isolated. The virus was isolated. How was it isolated? And the conditions, and the prison conditions, and the starvation conditions, and the conditions that war brought, and everywhere that the Red Army goes, all this desolation and disease is in its wake. They don't say anything about that. It's just this zootonic jump shit that we need to worry about, and we need the vaccines. Because you need to be afraid of the possibility of biological warfare, that too, which is going to play into it, because a lot of this is, Cold War shit, right? I mean, even if it's a bunch of bullshit, maybe both sides are still going to push the line for bullshit because they can gain out of it by keeping their own people afraid of what the enemy might have so that they can invest money in whatever. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying you can't say it's not the case. But for whatever reason, these public health policies, this system's approach, public health becomes the envy of the world and has since been adopted by the WHO, basically, literally every country in the world at this point, outside maybe a few outliers. But the United States itself has adopted this One Health policies. It's intrinsic to it's systemic throughout all of our government. In public health, we have public health, population health. Okay, now I'm going to continue that. I'm going to go down through this. This is kind of a long-winded, introduction into this show here today, but this is where I'm at. I'm trying to lay this out for you, but let's just get down to it. What I want to finish up. This is going to take probably this show and maybe another one to get down through the information that I have to wrap this shit up, but I don't know. I want to get it out there so that you have it for your consideration, and then we'll just go from there, right? But like I said, we mentioned the bioweapons thing earlier. Well, if you've got all this zootonic jump shit, and you've got all this, bioweapons that are being made out of all these viruses and pathogens and different stuff like that, then, whether they exist or not, the propaganda and military propaganda would be useful to, keep people where they want them, both domestically and abroad. It's kind of weird, but would you put it past them? Would you put it past them? Would you trust that our government wouldn't do that? It's kind of the question to ask, right? Would you trust that the Russians wouldn't do that? Or Soviet era, Stalin Soviet era, Russia wouldn't do that, But anyways, I'm going to go down through this bioweapons Chumakov connection, the Chumakov connection, and where that Chumakov connection brings us up in through to the COVID-19, up to COVID-19. Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that with every breakout of some new disease or virus or with everything, there's a push for public health. Centralized command and control of public health. Would it be a coincidence to know? Well, it's kind of interesting to know that the Rockefeller Foundation was involved at each and every point too. Not that I'm trying to prove that the Rockefeller Foundation was behind all this, but I just found today it was kind of an epiphany I had with that, because everywhere I'm looking at things, the Rockefeller Foundation pops up. The Rockefeller Foundation pops up at wherever in the world there happens to be some kind of virus breakout or mass vaccination policies and push for public health, push for the systems approach in public health. And we all know that the mission for the Rockefeller, well, we all know, but the mission for the Rockefeller Foundation is basically the implementation of the tenets of world socialism in public health. It's just what it is, you know. But you got this. I don't know how you pronounce it. This magazine here, the Journal of Medical Humanities. Can you put that together? The Journal of Medical Humanities. Again, humanities are world socialism. That's what the humanities are. Humanism. Humanism is a world socialism or a collectivism. I guess you could be a humanist. I don't know. But Marx said, I'm just, it's not an exact quote, but Marx said, where humanism is communism with the abolition of God, communism is humanism with the abolition of property. Kind of, or some shit like that, right? But anyways, I got this. I want to read this down. Cold War vaccine. Now remember, this is all happening in the Cold War. There's Albert Sabin. He's the guy who come up with that polio vaccine, right? The oral polio vaccine. Him and Hillary Kaprowski. But Albert Sabin's is the one that got a lot of play. It was his magazine, or his magazine, his vaccine that went global, right? It was the sugar cubes that I took as a kid in the early mid '60s. I remember going to school, either first, second grade, or some shit like that, where we all had to stand in line and get sugar cubes. My dad had polio. He had one arm that was half the size of the other one. His left arm couldn't. He never really had any muscle structure, so he basically had one arm over. It was like Popeye arms on one side of him, and just kind of, hardly nothing on the other. But yeah, so Sabin's guys. You got the Cold War vaccine, Albert Sabin, Russia, and the oral polio vaccine. And the only difference between this guys, I find it interesting to note in the history, is this Albert Sabin's oral vaccine was also supposed to shed. And this is this article here. That's a picture right there of Albert Sabin, second from the left. This guy right here. That's Albert Sabin. And Mikhail Chumakov. That's Chumakov right there. And third from the left, that's his. I believe that's his wife. Henry Winkler Center for History. But anyways, they've got Sabin in here and Chumakov, third from the left. They don't have his wife. That's his wife, I believe. And that's. I got another picture with another caption. I got that same picture with another different caption on it. It tells who those people are. But anyways, this was written in 2020, right? COVID's just getting the ball rolling here, right? In the midst of 2020, COVID-19 pandemic. Again, COVID-19. The similarities between polio, the public health that they're pushing, the population health that they're pushing, the world socialism, global governance, world socialism that they're pushing. It's all the same. In the midst of the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, okay, I got that red star there. We'll get to that in a minute. When international scientific cooperation, this is the internationalism, that scientific internationalism they refer to it as, seems to be the order of the day. It is heartening to recall that during the height of the Cold War tensions between USSR and the United States, collaboration between the American virologist and his Russian counterparts resulted in vaccine diplomacy, leading to the near worldwide elimination of polio in January of 1956. The worldwide elimination. Eradication was the word that they wind up using. Eradication of this disease, that virus, this virus, via the systems approach of simultaneous mass vaccinations, mandatory mass vaccinations. You know, to hell with any individual right to there's no such thing in that collectivism for anybody to have an individual right to not take the jab, for anybody to have an individual right to not expose themselves to the danger, or to come out against the propaganda, the state narrative. That's top-down command and control. The systems approach that became the envy of the world and would soon be implemented at the World Health Organization in countries around the world, including the United States. That the 1950s and polio is what really got the ball rolling on this. Okay? Just a point I'm trying to put out there. Okay, the vaccine diplomacy leading to the near worldwide elimination of polio. That's the narrative, okay? In January 1956, Albert Sabin received a call from the Public Health Service that a group of Russian scientists was traveling to the United States to study the preparation of the Salk vaccine. Another guy came up with a different vaccine. That one was a intermuscular, or at least a needle. But they hope to meet with other polio researchers, including Sabin at the University of Cincinnati. Yes, Salk was at the University of Pittsburgh, I think, or was in Pittsburgh. You know? But Sabin welcomed the visit and promised a program of conferences and demonstrations. The visit to the U.S. came at a pivotal moment in the fight against polio for the Soviet scientists. For Albert Bruce Sabin, it was a way forward. Albert Bruce Sabin, okay, 1906, he just died in 1993, was born Abram Saperstein Bialystok, Russia. He was born in Russia, which was restored to Poland. They say he was Polish or whatever, but he was born in Russia. It was restored to Poland. In 1921, he emigrated with his family to the United States. That would make him a teenager, okay, and became a naturalized citizen in 1930. He changed his name to Sabin and assumed the middle name Bruce. Just assumed it. Maybe he identified as a Bruce, I don't know. Graduating from New York University Medical School in 1931, he trained in international medicine and pathology at Bellevue Hospital. During the 1930s, he pursued a career in research at the Lister Institute for Preventive Medicine in England and the Rockefeller Institute, for medical research in the U.S. During World War II, he helped develop a vaccine against Japanese encephalitis. After the war, he was appointed to head pediatric research at the University of Cincinnati. The Russian virologist who visited the U.S. in January of 1956 included Mikhail P. Chumakov and his wife, Marina Voroshilova. I don't know how you say that. A distinguished researcher in her own right, and this is me in the red ink here. This is me anyway, but... Mikhail Chumakov and his wife Marina, okay, who, in case you weren't already aware, also happen to be the parents of Dr. Konstantin, or I don't know how you pronounce it, Chumakov, the University of Moscow graduate and one-time chief of laboratory bacterial genetics and the Institute of Microbiology of the Soviet Academy of Sciences in Moscow, who was also the associate director of vaccine research at the FDA during COVID. Coincidence? I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. This Soviet era virologist and his wife is the mother of our recent associate director of vaccine research and safety at the FDA, right? Just pointing it out there, okay? This it included Chumakov and his wife, okay? It also included these other people here, all right? The Soviet visit was conducted under strict State Department supervision, and special permission was required to visit Jonas Salk's laboratory in Pittsburgh, as the city was off limits to the Russians. So it was Pittsburgh. Okay, now I've got this one star up here, asterisk, I guess, for the COVID-19. This is COVID-19. Okay, under COVID-19, I got living legend Dr. Robert Gallo and his global vaccine network. He established a global, vaccine network. Also promoted polio vaccines as effective against COVID. Live polio vaccine fires up immune systems, provided protection from SARS-CoV-2 infection. Let's see. There's another weird thing. Okay, this guy, what is it? Living legend, right? But guess who else is involved with this? Guess there he is, Gallo, right? Guess who else is involved? See this guy here? Oh man. Can you see that? There he is. Can you see that guy? Konstantin Chumakov, right there on the right. This guy right here, right? This guy right here. Konstantin Chumakov. Just saying. He's part of Robert Gallo's international global vaccine. What do they call it? Global vaccine. Global virus network. Global virus network. Come on. Okay. Global virus network. All right. Anyways. Just pointing it out that this, Soviet team is the parents of, well, I guess he's no longer the associate director of research and safety at FDA, but he was through COVID. All right. Anyways, also, I wanted another little thing to point out here that, I haven't seen anybody else point out, is this guy, Konstantin Chumakov, right? FDA guy. And his brother, also the son of Mikhail Chumakov, and is Peter Chumakov is his name. And Konstantin, his brother Peter, is also a molecular biologist and award-winning hero of Putin in Russia. Yeah. Presenting Hero of Labor medals and Russian Federation national awards. And I've got him. There he is. The winners also include Peter Chumakov. Okay. Coincidence, right? As we've learned on a previous show, on previous shows. I've done shows on this Soviet era virology. This is from Coerced Soviet Virology to One Health and Disease X. I did this show. When did I do this show? About a year ago I did that show, it says. Okay? But again, that just shows the false premise upon all these things stood. And this also, this polio vaccines, the virology of these polio vaccines also stands on that same false premise. Or at least, if not false premise, highly questionable premise. Potentially false premise. I'll throw it out there like that. Okay? As we've learned on at least that previous show, the origins of the entire landscape of epidemiology, its natural nidality, okay, emerging and jumping zoonosis, veterinarian-based One Medicine, and its evolution into the human rights-based global governance of One Health, are all potentially, if not probably, premised on what it at least appears to be the documented bullshit, coerced virology of the Stalin-era Soviet Union. I shit you not. This is the entire landscape of epidemiology. Tick-borne... Come on. Tick-borne... Arbovirology? Yeah. The Cold War collaborations, a transitional history of tick-borne encephalitis. I'm going to be going over this a little bit here in a minute. Just want to show you that. Okay. Okay. Show the coerced Soviet virology PDF regarding the systems approach and the bullshit isolation of tick-borne encephalitis. Now, I went over this on another show. Okay. I just want to show you this here too. Rockefeller Foundation again, right? Let me see if we can get this just a little bit. I ain't gonna be able to get it in there. But okay. I got this right here. I'm going to read this abstract. This is the emerging... let me go back. Where do I start here? Just to kind of go over this little bit of a history. I recommend that you watch that whole show on the coerced Soviet era virology. But just kind of where we were here. In 1937, at the request of the Military Sanitary Department of the Red Army, the Soviet... Let me see, what the hell article is this? This is that transitional history, okay, of tick-borne encephalitis. This came out in 2023, all right? The Soviet People's Commission, Commissariat of Health, organized a scientific mission led by Jewish virologist Lev Ziebler to investigate reports on unknown diseases in the region of, I don't know how to pronounce that. Ziebler's expedition, some part of Russia. Ziebler's expedition established a viral ethnology of disease. Ziebler's expedition established the viral ethnology of disease, which soon became known in Russia as tick-borne encephalitis, in English as Russian spring-summer encephalitis. This mission isolated the causative virus and identified the tick as its vector. Okay. Now, we can get into this all you want. I'm going to just continue reading this paragraph, and I'm going to come back to this article here. In 1938 through 1940, the expeditions to study tick-borne encephalitis continued under the new leadership of parasitologist Evgeny Pavlovsky. I don't know, I'm probably saying that wrong. Virologist, another virologist, and an epidemiologist. I'm not even going to try pronouncing their names. The isolated TB tick-borne encephalitis virus became the key to studies of environmental circulation of arthropod-borne viruses, later developed by Pavlovsky into his natural nidality theory, okay, which applied the ecological niche approach to the study of zoonosis. Telling you. This is the mission that establishes all these things, okay? Pavlovsky's theory not only became a dominant framework in Soviet public health, it at least until the 1980s, but also provided the pattern for the initial research and related vector-borne viruses across the globe, and is sometimes considered to be one of the theoretical precursors of the science of landscape epidemiology and One Health agenda. I'm not making this shit up. Okay? Now, look at... He isolates. Let's go back to this isolation shit, okay? This is how they isolated it. Okay? Tick-borne encephalitis, discoverer, Soviet virologist accused of spreading infections across Moscow. Yeah, he was arrested. This article comes out in 1921, okay? But, yeah, they could arrest you for anything then. Throw you in prison for anything if they wanted to. That's command and control, top-down command and control of everything at all times, right? By central planners. Or a dictator. Same thing. The epidemic of a mysterious disease, a previously unknown form of encephalitis, was raging in the Russian Far East. A scientist who identified its carrier is now righteously called the father of Soviet immunology. Yeah. Yet the medic was accused of spreading the deadly infection via water supply systems and declared a public enemy. Shit like that happens in Soviet Stalin era Soviet Union, right? There was many similar stories at that time. Terror in 1930s and 50s Gulag, medical case in 1952. Lev Ziebler was arrested 3 times between 1930 and 1944. It's the guy who led that encephalitis mission. With Chumakov was part of that mission, by the way, Mikhail Chumakov. The first time he, a young doctor of the Institute of Microbiology at Azerbaijan, was sent to Hadrut to supervise the suppression of an outbreak of plague. The ciphers decided to call it OR, not to cause panic among the population of those people over there. The disease had killed entire cities back in the Middle Ages, but how could it have emerged in the 20th century? All right, the story resembled an adventure detective with elements of a thriller, according to local officer. Foreign saboteurs spread the disease through the Republic, opening plague-ridden corpses and cutting out the hearts and livers. Yeah, these people, they have some kind of superstition over there that if people are dying in your family, then they go and they dig up their past relatives and they cut out the hearts and the livers and they chop them up and feed them to their family, and that's supposed to stop the people from dying. I don't know. There's that kind of shit going on all the time, which they attributed to virology, right? Yeah. I shit you not. You have to read this article. But let's get down to where I'm getting at here. What am I getting here? Where am I going? Wait a minute, P. Hang on a second, kid. Hang on a second, because she's getting upset. What's going on, kid? I'm trying to find this. There's a tick-borne. P's kind of going nuts here. But anyways. Here. Pete, here. Okay. Doctors in the Far East were confronted with hang on a second. Pete. Hey, here. She's extorting me. Let's get to the story. Let's see if I can get this out of here. Doctors in the Far East were confronted with an unknown disease again that was either fatal or seriously affected the nervous system. get it. I don't know what's going on down there. Somebody's probably here. Somebody's probably here. She figured it out. Mom will take care of her. But anyways, the region was being actively developed, ore, gold, and timber were being mined. Large family units were moved into the Taija. I don't know. They were to be a support in case of the Japanese aggression. Let me see. Large army units were moved into the area. They were to be a support in case of Japanese aggression. Okay. Right. In case of Japanese aggression. The affliction was first described as far back as 1935. The scale of the scourge began to grow at unprecedented rate with the arrival of the Red Army. Coincidence? Commander of the Special Far Eastern Army, Marshal Blucher, reported in his letter to his superior or whatever on the high mortality rate among soldiers and commanders. Local medics could not reach a consensus. Some doctors believed that they were dealing with a hazardous type of toxic influenza. Sound familiar? Others with Japanese mosquito encephalitis. An expedition led by Ziebler. Okay, this is that Ziebler, the Jewish guy that they sent, that I was telling you about, right? This is an explanation of what happened on that mission, which Mikhail Chumakov was part of, by the way. Okay, so an expedition led by Ziebler was dispatched to site as a matter of urgency in May 1937. He found out that the people were predominantly sick in the spring, which means that the Japanese form of encephalitis was out of the question, supposedly. It was contracted in the summer. In addition, only those who worked in the forests, geologists and hunters and foresters, and picked berries and nuts are the people who became infected. They did not have contact with each other and could stay isolated from the rest of the world for a long time. So the airborne flu idea did not work either. This is a picture of these people in this area, the conditions that they were living in. The first victim of the season, a housewife, said that she had not been out of her village for 2 years, but she remembered finding several ticks on herself after returning from the woods or wherever she was a couple of weeks ago. The scientists had found the cause because this lady remembered that she had a couple ticks on her. So that was, well, it's got to be the ticks. That's it. That's your science. I flew to Vladivostok and learned at least a little about ticks. I didn't understand anything about them then. In the work of a veterinarian, I found a curve of tick bites on cows that was the same as the curve disease increase in humans, only 2 weeks late. This time was the incubation period. The likelihood of disease being transmitted in this way was self-evident. I sent expedition members to the Taija, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, to brief those working there about the dangers at the end of May. Subsequently, it turned out that only one of them fell ill in 1937, although previous years it had been the most affected group. And that was this Lev Alexandrovich recalled. That's how he recalled that. He passed on his advice to military doctors who still advise soldiers to rinse their mouths with manganese as a reassurance. In just 3 months, Ziebler and his expedition team established which included Mikhail Chumakov, by the way, established the epidemiology of the disease and its vector, isolated 29 strains of pathogen, studied the clinic, pathological anatomy, and histology. The research speed was astonishing. Oh, man, it's crazy, right? Given the conditions under which it was carried out. Given the conditions under which all that research was carried out. What were those conditions? Were they, how scientific was it, There was no sterile boxes, laminators, endless rubber gloves, and disposable masks. There was nothing. The infection of several staff members marred success. One died, a second went blind, and the third went deaf and was left with a paralyzed arm. It could have been assumed that the virus had any particular extraordinary effectivity. It could not have been assumed that the virus had any particularly extraordinary infectivity. After all, we were pioneers in this field. We were the first people on Earth to hold this previously unknown virus, Ziebler wrote. Those pictures look familiar. Is that a spike protein? Holy crap! Is that a cleavage site in there? I don't know. Anyways, in August, the scientists returned to Moscow. All right. All Soviet newspapers wrote about his victory. He was presented with awards. Somewhere ahead loomed the Stalin Prize. Right. But in November, he was arrested on a denunciation of an attempt to infect Moscow with encephalitis through the city's water supply and the slow development of a vaccine. According to Kavarin, it was the work of his brother's direct superior, the director of the Institute of Microbiology, Mezhchenko. He refused to accept the material brought by the expedition, stating that the presence of viral strains within the walls of his institution was fraught with danger. Ziebler, the denunciation reported that the scientist and his assistant were poisoning wells and killing horses under the guise of fighting encephalitis. Meanwhile, a group of scientists from the second and third expeditions to the Far East received the Stalin Prizes for the discoveries of the science. Two other guys got the Stalin Prize for the discoveries that the scientist had made, Ziebler. While in prison, he wasted no time inventing a cure for pellagra, thus saving the lives of thousands of convicts dying of terrible avitaminosis. I don't know. A year and a half later, thanks to the unthinkable efforts of Ziebler and several people, including Ziebler's wife, incidentally the creator of the Soviet version of penicillin, and his friend, the writer, I can't pronounce his name, the virologist, was released. Ziebler was released. Ahead of him was another arrest. Ahead of him was the arrest and refusal to work for bacteriological weapons. He refused to work on bacteriological weapons. His release and departure into the field of cancer virology. Okay, the concept of viral origin of tumors earned him worldwide recognition, enabling him to join the Association of American, French, and Belgian oncologists and become a member of the British Royal Society of Medicine. There you have it. All part of the same, all coming out of the same mission of tick-borne encephalitis, right? The guys involved with that mission. But what I'm saying is that, there were the conditions that these were in, right? No, that's not the one I'm looking for. But anyways, you got that. The emerging zoonotic diseases, an opportunity to apply the concepts of nidality and One Health. Okay. This is that Soviet virology, kind of a refresher course on where this all comes from here. Okay. The use of animals as sentinels in human disease revolves around the concept of nidality. Nidality is a derivative of the root word nidus. Application of the concept of nidality is the development of prevention strategies and most frequently been associated with military campaigns and interruption of tick-borne encephalitis. Modern usage of the phrase "one medicine" was popularized in the United States and Europe by Calvin Schwab, and the concept is attributed to Rudolf Virchow. It is applied today to the study of zoonotic diseases, interventions in the rural agricultural communities, bird flu and the cows, right? That share close living arrangements between people and their families, their pastoral work environment, and the animals for which they care. Integration of the two concepts of one medicine and nidality provides an opportunity to apply a systems approach, okay, i.e. general systems theory, to dealing with emerging zoonotic diseases in today's global agricultural industrial settings. This is the public health. This is what public health is today, okay? I got this other little thing down in here. A continuation of this article right here. Sorry. Continuation of this article right here. All right. Okay. The case fatality TB observed early trials, 27 to 30% in the control group, was dramatic because it was unclear to which extent it could be attributed to the virus alone. Medical researchers in the Gulag had recently come to the attention of historians who revealed the conspicuous silence of Soviet scientists, many of whom were also prisoners. This is what I'm getting at. Not only were they conducting science experiments and coming up with narratives on everything out there on these missions on people that were basically slaves to the system, the doctors and scientists themselves were also prisoners and slaves to the system, right? Come up with what I'm telling you to come up with or die. About the social context of their research subjects. Let me see. Medical researchers in the Gulag has recently come to the attention of historians who revealed the conspicuous silence of Soviet scientists, many of whom were also prisoners. About the social context of their research subjects. The social context of their research subjects when any references to camps, starvation, or ruthless exploitation were avoided. In the case of tick-borne encephalitis research, the concealment of the camp context had not only ethical but also empirical implications. The health status and post-infection survival chances of forced laborers or settlers had been severely compromised by very poor nutrition. Okay. Vitamin deficiencies, exhaustive work, lack of health care in the universal health care of communism, world socialism, they had a lack of health care, right? As well as abuse. You have a right to health care. But they don't tell you how much health care that you have a right to. They don't tell you when you're going to get that health care. Or, but anyways, yeah. The poor nutrition, the vitamin deficiencies, exhaustive work, lack of health care, as well as abusive, torture, or other traumatic experiences connected to arrest, deportation, and imprisonment. people are all under all these stressful conditions, stressful conditions, life-threatening stressful conditions, while they're doing all these scientific studies on them, right? However, Soviet scientists did not reflect on how those factors could have influenced the striking tick-borne encephalitis mortality or morbidity they observed, and attributed them exclusively to the properties of the virus, reinforcing the image of tick-borne encephalitis as highly lethal. This is the premise. This is the premise upon which all these things stand. 1940s and 50s witnessed an explosion of interest in tick-borne encephalitis. One reason was the dissemination of Soviet studies. These Soviet studies, right? They were given credence when maybe they might, maybe they shouldn't have been, right? But were they coming up with the answers that everybody wanted to know? I don't know. Right? Yeah, with the dissemination of these Soviet studies, questionable Soviet studies, and the increasingly international attention to Soviet biomedicine more generally, World War II reversed the isolationist tendencies of the Soviet science. Where have we heard that before? Reversed the isolationism of World War II reversed the isolationist tendencies of Soviet science, evident in the late 1930s. Oh, they're talking about Lysenkoism, probably. And a reopening opportunities for exchange between Soviet and Western scholars, especially in natural sciences. Remember, natural sciences, natural is evolutionary. Virology became one of the fields of such cooperation. As the findings of Soviet tick-borne encephalitis research were quickly published, the findings were quickly published in widely available academic outlets, and not only in Russian but also in German and English. It allowed for the international recognition of Soviet virology and stimulated interest in tick-borne encephalitis. Soviet virologists were then specialized in tick-borne encephalitis research, visited the U.S. as guests of the U.S. Typhoid Commission and the Rockefeller Foundation. The same shit that kind of happened with polio, right? But what I'm just trying to show you is here. I highly recommend that you watch that show that I did on the coerced virology of the virology of the Soviet, Union, Stalin era, Lenin era, right? World War II, post-World War II era Soviet Union. I highly recommend you watch it because it puts it out there that the premise upon which all these things that stand today in public health, our understanding of what public health is, our understanding of what virology is, our understanding of what epidemiology is, our understanding of what, zoonosis and, one medicine and one health and jumping virology, is all premised on, what the Soviet Union was putting out there in the 1920s and 30s, 40s, and 50s, which the conditions that they were putting them on, and the orders, the social aspects of their findings, which was, whatever narratives the Soviet Union government wanted to put out there, what best benefited them. So now that we've kind of refreshed with that a little bit here, we can get back to what we were talking about, which all of these things, okay, as we've learned on a previous show, and this that just went over the origins of the entire landscape of epidemiology, its natural nidality, emerging jumping zoonosis, veterinarian-based one medicine, and its evolution into the human rights-based global governance of one health, all are potentially, if not probably, premised on what at least appears to be the documented bullshit of coerced virology of the Soviet era virology. which again are all implicit in the systems approach, okay, intrinsic to the concept of population or public health, and global governance and redistributive justice of human rights. They're all synonymous. They're all synonymous. They all work together as one. You know, they all work together as one. It's a network. You know, it's a network of revolutionary world socialism. They're all part of the tenets of world socialism. Okay. The redistributed justice, global governance, and redistributed justice of human rights. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Equator Principles, upstream DEI, ESG mandates, etc. are all part of this too. They all come out of the same shit. What I mean by upstream is that when you get these contracts with all these sustainable development shit that's going on there, this whole Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Agenda 2050, you know, net zero, climate change, windmills, solar panels, Green New Deal shit, right? The public-private partnerships of, you know, the Green New Deal. You know, that's all comes out of this. Just freaking DEI, ESG is implied in that of the United Nations diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental, ESG, environmental, social governance. They mandate that if you're going to get these contracts, you have to basically drink the Kool-Aid on the tenets of world socialism, redistributive justice of the tenets of world socialism. Okay, UN Sustainable Development Goals, all these you know, different public health policies, you know, the narrative. You have to push the narrative, but not only in your own business. Not only make sure that your business is bending the knee and kissing the ring. You have to make sure, it's called pushing upstream, that you make sure that your whole supply chain, all your subcontractors and sub-subcontractors and the whole of your supply chain are drinking the Kool-Aid and bend the knee and kiss the ring too. Otherwise, you're not going to get the contract. It's called be pushed up and stream. Once you mandate, once these public-private partnerships that all depend on the government money, it's official policy in there that you're going to have to bend the knee and kiss the ring to the narrative, to the tenets of world socialist revolution. When you sign on to this sustainable development and take the money for these contracts, you got to become an agent of the revolution to get the contract, and make sure that all your subcontractors are agents of the revolution, and make sure that all your suppliers, your whole supply chains, are agents of the revolution. That's essentially what it is. You know, you got to throw anybody and everybody out there that's out of the business, that's exposed to market principles or is exposed to market forces. This doesn't apply to them. You know, this is because if you be part of a private partnership, you're protected from market forces, because now you're on the inside. You are actually part of the government. You know, but yeah, so you've got this whole upstream DEI, ESG mandates, etc., and any and all centralized top-down protocols intrinsic to public health policies that, in case you haven't noticed the obvious, especially since COVID, have since been adopted worldwide, not only by the World Health Organization and some 190 plus other nations, but the United States itself. All these things that were the envy of the world Health Organizations and other countries that came to be the envy of the world when they watched how much command and control the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries had over their populations for mass vaccinations against, you know, polio to begin with, right? For one. Everybody's like, wow, can you imagine if we had that much command and control? It's a technocratic wet dream, man. That's what it is, right? So, all of which, again, are part and parcel to the call for the progress of more and more revolutionary Marxian, collectivist, social change against our republic as founded. The whole of our natural, endowed by our Creator, be it nature or nature's God, okay, individual rights and liberty, as well as the property-based free enterprise capitalist system upon which they are all contingent. none of our freedoms, none of our liberties could possibly exist without the free enterprise of free exchange of property owned for property desired, which again couldn't exist without a mutually recognized right to private property. As soon as you compromise your right to private property, you compromise the only avenue through which an independent pursuit of happiness is even possible. And the major way that our property rights are compromised today in this system is through the redistributive justice of human rights. As soon as they can redistribute, confiscate and distribute whatever percentage of the property and wealth that you own, whatever measure of prosperity that you have achieved towards an independent happiness can be confiscated at any moment at the rate which has been dictated by the government, is the degree to which your right to that property of your private property has been compromised. As your private property becomes compromised, you have compromised the only avenue through which the pursuit of an independent happiness is even possible. The only earthly avenue through which an independent happiness is even possible. The pursuit of an independent happiness. This is why redistributive justice is an assault on the freedom and liberty of everybody, regardless of race or gender. It just is. But people don't want to think about that aspect of it, you know. I got this Marxian here, because all of which again are part and parcel to the call for the progress of more and more revolutionary Marxian / collectivist social change. I've got this little asterisk here. Marx, I've got this systems approach that I've been kind of touching on here, right? Marx being the OG, albeit uncredited, systems approach guru. Marx, they give credit to Marx as being the OG original gangster in the frickin' systems approach guru. Okay. Let me see. Marx. I got, okay. Weekly Worker is a hammer and sickle right here. You can't see it. Okay. It says Weekly Worker in the UK. Review Dialectal and Systems Theory. Richard Levins and Richard Lewontin. Biology Under the Influence. That's a book that they wrote. I kind of went over this in another show. All right. But they call Mark the kind of the original guru for OG guru for systems approach. Okay, from which the first critical awareness, then critical conscious, opened up all systems fundamental to our once free society through the systems approach. If you take some Marxian revolutionary critical theory type systems approach, you look at all the systems of our society, all the pillars of our society, all the systems, the legal system, the prison system. Do you understand? The capitalist system, the property system, the systemic whiteness, the systemic racism, systemic white supremacy. However, you can freely exchange whiteness of America for property or capitalist. It's basically the same doctrine with the words just switched. You replace capitalism with whiteness, and it's the same shit. It's just the same doctrine with a couple words switched in order to attack and assault different fissures and drive wedges in different fissures of contention in the United States or any society targeted for destruction. It just happens to be that in this instance it's our society targeted for destruction to, as Alinsky said, rub raw the sores of discontent. This is where we are. Yeah, so what this does, critical theory, okay, opens up all of our systems in our country as a stock out of which social evolution and or revolution can arise. And I got this here. The Academy of Systems Change. Why can't... It just doesn't want to... It says the Academy for Systems Change, okay? The Donella Meadows Project. Leverage points, places to intervene in a system. See that? Places to intervene in a system. Systems approach. Okay, and just to give you a brief overview with the systems approach, folks who do systems analysis have a great belief in leverage points. These are places within a complex system, corporation, an economy, living body, a city or ecosystem where a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. Basically, I mean, it's a tactic. It's a revolutionary socialist tactic for revolution, not necessarily just for socialist revolution, but it's a tactic, systems approach for systemic change system. And this is the whole thing that became the envy of the world, and they watched it in motion and in process during the mass vaccinations for the Sabin vaccine throughout Soviet Union, Soviet Bloc, and Eastern Bloc countries around the world. And they said, wow, man, look what they did there. Look at how they can do that. And then when they go out there and they say that they did all this good with all this, can't really call it into question. They did it without any control groups. Can't call it into question. You know. I've seen and shown the Chumakov connection. Okay, we're going for the Chumakov. What's the Chumakov connection on this, right? I've seen and shown the Chumakov connection, namely between the Soviet scientist Mikhail Chumakov and his son, our own FDA's recent Konstantin Chumakov. He was recently. I don't think he's there anymore. On a previous show, I did this. I've gone over this on a previous show. Yeah, coerced Soviet virology. I kind of touched on this a little bit. I've since dug into this a little bit more, possibly exposing the Chumakov bioweapons accusatory, because in that show, I talk about this guy, A.W. Finnegan, and he's on an interview. He's written a book, and he's talked about it on several different interviews and a couple books. He refers to MP Chumakov as Stalin's top secret bioweapon engineer, bioweaponeer, or whatever. I did some research into this. I can't find anything anywhere to back that up. Nowhere. I find it nowhere but in his work or the other guy that he's getting information from. I'll go over that in a minute. But I've since dug into it a little bit more, possibly exposing the Chumakov bioweapons accusatory narrative as a possible diversionary cover for an even larger, more encompassing and still ongoing revolutionary world collectivist socialist assault on the whole of the free world, particularly America and our founding principles, constitutional republic, individual liberty, our faith, and our entire way of life, via what's doctrinarily known as collectivism's systems approach. Again, this is a systems approach. The systems approach of public health, specifically. In relation to Stalin and Soviet bioweapons, the name Chumakov, like I mentioned earlier, shows up nowhere that I can find other than A.W. Finnegan's work, including his interviews and books, not even in relation to the exposure of the Soviet clandestine reparate project, which is like this here. They got the Soviet Union's secret biological weapons program should give you nightmares. This came out in 2025. But Chumakov shows up 0 times. Chumakov shows up 0 times. I mean, if he was the top bioweaponeer, right, his name would at least show up on some of these things, But not even in relationship to the exposure of the Soviets' clandestine reparate project is the name Chumakov mentioned even once that I could find. Though I've been unable to find any other sources identifying MP Chumakov as Stalin's top secret bioweaponeer outside the work of A.W. Finnegan and colleagues, which happened to be John Loftus and John Loftus. He mentions this guy John Loftus a lot. I never heard of him. I did a little research into him, and I'll tell you. We'll get to him in a minute. Okay, there is a multitude of sources documenting the very real relationship. Even though I can't find any evidence of the shit that they're putting out there, the bioweapons, you know, top secret bioweapon here, you know, I can't find it anywhere. I can't corroborate it. I can't validate it. I have to somehow be able to come up with, you know, some evidence to the fact that of what he's saying that can be corroborated. This is why I'm doing all this work to put out all this information that's corroborated everything I'm saying in multiple places around the world by academics, by Russian academics even, you know. What I'm trying to tell you, I'm showing you this, I'm getting this out there. But I can't find anything, you know, if Chumakov was a top secret Stalin bioweaponeer, boy, wouldn't that be something if, you know, his son was the guy who was in charge of vaccine research and safety, FDA, with the COVID vaccine got, you know, approved. That'd be crazy shit. But just because that's being thrown out there as a, you know, conspiracy theory, and at this point, I'm not saying it's 100% not true. I'm just saying at this point, it appears to be not much more than a conspiracy theory to derail or sidetrack some other investigation potentially. I don't know. That's what I'm getting at. You know what I mean? And what they're trying to distract from is the actual revolutionary advancements done through the systems approach on public health through the vaccines and epidemiology. Pushing for that public health narrative, that one medicine narrative, that one health narrative, and the global governance, overarching global governance that comes with it. Public health laws that come with it. You know? The loss of national sovereignty that comes with it. The loss of everything that comes with it. The only thing that gains is collectivism and socialism. You know? But this is where I'm going. Yeah. Though I've been unable to find any other sources identifying MP Chumakov as Stalin's top secret bioweaponeer outside the work of A.W. Finnegan and colleagues, there is a multitude of sources documenting the very real relationship between MP Chumakov and a number of very early vaccinologists coming to the forefront of emerging diseases eradication programs like Albert Sabin, to name just one. Their collaboration and the centralized top-down systems approach intrinsic to the collectivism of not only Lenin and Stalin's Soviet Union, but any and all other collectivist, communist, socialist countries, not to mention, if you think about it, any country anywhere implementing the mandatory simultaneous mass vaccinations to, quote, every child in the country, called for by Albert Sabin. This is what I'm telling you. Okay? And this article came out in 2009. Albert Sabin and the Coalition to Eliminate Polio from America. From the Americas, not just America. This is Central and South America, too. You know, there's a whole history on this. Albert Sabin and mass vaccination. You know? Again, Sabin entered public arena, and after years of work on viruses in general, polio in particular, he began his research on infectious disease while working his way through medical school in the late 1920s, and subsequently focused on polio and other viruses as a researcher at the Rockefeller Institute, now Rockefeller University. Again, Rockefeller, right? But anyways, is it a coincidence? I got this a little bit here on, Albert or Adam W. Finnegan. This is John Loftus guy that he mentions. They also mention this guy Eric Traub in there, and MP Chumakov. Okay. Let me see. Yeah. See, there's other people did a lot of research into trying to find information on Eric Traub, a German scientist brought over via Operation Paperclip. Okay. Operation Paperclip. You know, that was crazy too, right? Where they brought all the Nazis, they brought a bunch of Nazi scientists and shit. They didn't have to go through the Nuremberg trials. They were just brought to the United States. Operation Paperclip. Dulles, one of the Dulles brothers. It was John Foster Dulles and another one. A weird, yeah. That Dulles name. That's another thing, and we might be getting into sometime too. Is the name of John Foster Dulles, and he had a brother. I can't remember. It was Alan or I think Dulles. I can't remember his brother's name. He was in charge of the CIA. John Foster was the Secretary of State or some shit. And together, they were pretty much involved with almost everything that was kind of screwed up. You know, everything that's kind of screwed up in the 20th century, pretty much. But anyways, I got this history, and the guy Eric Traub that he's mentioning all the times in here. I got a military records forum helping civilians and veterans look for military records past and present. As of 2023, not much archives on Traub have been digitized. They're just, the information isn't there, obtainable by most people. You know, I've been unable to confirm any of it. Furthermore, I've found one Finnegan stated main resource, John Loftus, which he refers to as one of his main resources of information. I've seen other people refer to it as information on this whole Chumakov, Stalin, bioweaponeer shit, to be somewhat of a conspiracy theorist. If you look up John Loftus, these people, just conspiracy theorists, comes right to the forefront of who they are, which they would do with anybody anyway. So it's not this because Wiki or anybody else is saying that they're conspiracy theorists. I think they're conspiracy theorists. I just can't validate anything other than I can't validate it. So, and they're also known conspiracy theorists affiliated with promoting a number of conspiracy theories, including in relationship to those affiliated with the USS Liberty. I don't know. I just did a cross research on that. You know, found that this guy Loftus is also, you know, affiliated with the USS Liberty conspiracies. It's a tough one. USS Liberty conspiracies. It's a tough one because. But the only thing is my experience with hearing and reading the accusatory of what the USS Liberty is usually coming from organizations and people that have a axe to grind against the United States. They're using it, they're utilizing it to push revolution in the United States or undermine the United States or deconstruct the interests of the United States. And that's kind of a common thread that goes through a lot of people pushing this whole USS Liberty conspiracy theories on that, you know. And the USS Liberty was a U.S. Navy spy ship that was bombed by Israel during the Six-Day War in 1967, in case you didn't know what the USS Liberty is or was. Many, if not most, have been and are still being perpetuated by those who I have found in my own past research on the subject to be hostile to America, like I just said. America is founded, in particular, the Lyndon LaRoche cult being chief among them. You know, I've seen that. Those false flag guys that are pushing this shit that are affiliated with, you know, people like other conspiracy theorists, Alex Jones or that kind of thing. Dave Hodges, I think, was another guy that was pushing it at one time. But this is what I remember when the LaRoche Pack infiltrated the Tea Party at the time years ago, because I used to write for a Tea Party newspaper, kind of, The Patriot was the name of it. But I noticed all these writings that were coming in that were more nationalist, and that's how I first came across the LaRoche Pack and a lot of these other guys that are kind of fringe LaRochians, and false flag Dave, I used to call him, Dave Hodges, and he was affiliated with InfoWars and that shit too for a while. Just people pushing, I don't know, if they can discredit you, if you jump onto one of these conspiracies and they can discredit you because they get you to jump onto one of these conspiracy theories that can never be proven. That's what good conspiracies do. They never can't be proven or disproven. Even better. But they get you to chase your tail. Meanwhile, you're occupied chasing your tail, and you are prevented from digging into something actually real. That can, and even if the conspiracy theory is real or was real, then, but you can't prove it real. You see what I'm saying? And you're concentrating on all your energy on that, then you're distracted, and that's what it is. It distracts you from pursuing the truth in other areas that could be actually shown to be true, you know? Yeah, additionally, at the end of Chapter 9 of his extensively and professionally researched book, The Liberty Incident, okay, this is this book here. I've actually talked about this on a few other shows. I got this book, The Liberty Incident, and this guy here, A.J. Crystal, I'm not saying it's the, you know, end-all, be-all in books, but I read it, and I find his work to be credible and documented. And but taking what I already know about who's pushing this USS Liberty, conspiracy and who isn't, is most of the people that are pushing it have an axe to grind against the United States. This A.J. Crystal, okay, dedicates a half a dozen pages to this guy John Loftus. Let's see. Chapter 9, titled Conspiracy Theories, coincidentally. But and he dedicates the whole last half dozen pages or so to John Loftus. Is it just a coincidence? And the conspiracy theories of John Loftus. And he just says, dedicates a half dozen pages anyway to dispelling what, in his own words and observations, amount to 1, a total and absolute disregard for all 13 official U.S. and Israeli inquiries, and 2, disregards for the fact that when the facts disagree with the conspiracy theory. Again, not only can I not find any evidence to Chumakov, this Loftus conspiracy of Chumakov being Stalin's chief bioweaponeer, I've seen evidence to the contrary where this guy Loftus has pushed conspiracy theories that are being utilized by people who have an axe to grind against the United States. I just put those two things together. But that's where I'm at on it. So I just have to take what I know and what I've researched into consideration going forward on it. In fact, considering the highly questionable Marxian Soviet and Cold War context in which the fields of jumping virology, epidemiology, and vaccinology were developed, Chumakov being involved in it from the beginning with the isolation of the tick-borne encephalitis, it wouldn't surprise me if one day in the not-so-distant future the whole of them, including the need for the global governance socialism of human rights-based One Health and or public health, same thing, they necessitate, were wholly discredited as nothing more than politically based psychological warfare bullshit on both sides of the Iron Curtain than anything actually real or objectively scientifically based. It wouldn't surprise me if the whole of epidemiology as we know it today, of virology as we know it today, ecology as we know it today, evolutionary science as we know it today is all bullshit based on a social narrative. Have you noticed that the war for the New World Order, the war for the New World Order, isn't any longer between freedom and individual liberty, America's founding principles or our republic, and the enslaving collectivism of world socialism, but between the multitude of factors of the world socialisms themselves, multiple world socialisms. It's no longer between the New World Order of socialism and freedom and liberty and America's founding principles, and American Republic, and our Constitution. It's between the world socialisms themselves. This is where I'm getting at, okay? Most notably between the world socialism and communism of a global intergovernmental United Nations-centered world socialist New World Order. Okay, I've touched on this in my last show, actually. And the so-called private stakeholder model, private, because they're private businesses, the private stakeholder model, world socialist fascism of the more technocratic world economic forms, more technocratic Great Reset. Actually, they're both technocratic. The New World Order, the United Nations centered New World Order, is just as technocratic as the private centered stakeholder model, which the UN would be just a stakeholder in the stakeholder model that was being led by the World Economic Forum's type Great Reset, right? There's just two different world socialisms fighting for control of the world socialism that's going to be, running the world. Okay? Effectively, you have a neoliberal, colonial, imperialist, private, fascist, public health fighting each other and shitting on each other. You have a neoliberal, colonialist, imperialist, private, fascist public health, which is be like the Great Reset, against versus post-colonial, post-imperialist, socialist, communist public health. Government run. Government dictated. It's just, again, it's more like a communism, fascism thing. You know what I mean? Liberty, freedom, America as founded, our republic, our Constitution have no place, have no horse in that race, in that war. As a matter of fact, both of them have targeted them all for destruction, equally targeted them for destruction. People get caught up and get taken aside on that. Health for all. Histories of international and global health. See for disease and development and Cold War. This is from 2021. And this is from the Commonwealth Fund. Okay. Abstract goal. Compare health systems performance in 10 countries, including the United States, to glean insights for U.S. improvement. Okay, here's where we get the shit on. All the information for public health information were, the top-down command and control systems approach, human rights-based system approach, centrally planned approach of communist countries, Eastern Bloc countries versus the, willy-nilly capitalist for-profit system of the United States, right? Okay, we had they did key findings on this. Is the top three countries are Australia, the Netherlands, and the United Kingdom. Although differences in overall performance between most countries are relatively small, the only clear outlier is the U.S. They're going to pick the U.S. They're going to isolate the U.S. Just kind of an Alinsky tactic here. You isolate the U.S. and ostracize them, where health system performance is dramatically lower. Conclusion, the U.S. continues to be a class by itself in the underperformance of its healthcare coverage. Okay, was COVID-19 an opportunity to put United States out there as the only country that didn't have universal health care? The only country that, well, we're pushing public health now, but maybe we're not communist enough. Maybe we still have something left of the capitalist for-profit system, that they got to squash. And COVID-19 was just another opportunity to push this whole narrative against the United States for a fuller, more comprehensive fundamental transformation, all right, on behalf of the world socialist revolution at large. Yeah, so while other 9 countries differ in details of their systems approach, in their performance on domains unlike the U.S., they all have found a way to meet their residents' most basic healthcare needs, including universal health coverage. Universal coverage. This is where I'm telling you. Is it a coincidence that every time one of these epidemics comes up, that they utilize it for push of socialist revolution? They push the tenets of socialist revolution. They push the tenets of, health equity. They push the tenets of universal health care, redistributive justice and health equity, and redistributive justice of human rights, and the sustainable development goals, help with climate change and all that other shit too, right? Conveniently. Let me see what we got here. Let me see. We got to go down here to 4. That ain't gonna work. Disease and development. Okay, let me just try that one more time. Okay, let me see what we got right here. I can't find it, but anyways, I can't find it. Either way, okay, either way, between the battle of these two collectivisms, these world socialisms, okay, the private WEF model and the government New World Order, where UN is the center, intergovernmental New World Order. Either way, however, not only the sovereignty of the United Nations, not only the sovereignty of nation states, but human dignity, freedom, and liberty all lose, and nothing but the centralized power of world socialism wins in that model. Like I said, we don't have a horse in that race. From a liberty perspective, there's no horse in that race for us as a free people. For the benefit of none but a small handful of benefactors, planners, at the expense, mind you, of the very human collective that they all claim to be looking out for. The whole of humanity is enslaved. This is what I'm trying to get at here. It's an epiphany worth, consideration, albeit an epiphany neither science nor academia can acknowledge, at least as we know them today, lest they lose the government funding upon which they have come to not only be entirely dependent upon, but largely synonymous with. Right? How are they going to speak out against the system that is the only reason why they exist? that not only perpetuates but initiates their very existence. Nevertheless, as has been documented, this Marxian systems approach is inextricably connected with authoritarian inherent in communist states. It was also utilized by Chumakov in highly questionable vaccine trials of Albert Sabin's shedding oral polio vaccine he then directed across the Soviet Union, which was the largest field trial to date. They weren't just questionable, they were potentially downright fraudulent, like I've been saying before, on a multitude of levels. Sabin himself was aware that these trials in no way met the standards of any actual scientific or humane approach, any objectively scientific or humane, for that reason, even so much as even being a humane approach to test the vaccines, right? Now, this documented that Marxian systems approach is what is inextricably connected with authoritarian inherent in communist states. Authoritarianism inherent in communist states. Vaccination in the communist state. This Dora Varga is like the world-renowned go-to academic on historian on this. You know, she's a humanitarian professor. You know, yeah. It was also utilized by Chumakov in the highly questionable trials of Albert Sabin. Sabin's vaccine that Chumakov led. This is Distillation. This is Science History Institute Museum here and Library Distillations Magazine. This just came out. When that? Oh, 2016 it came out. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Highly questionable. This article calls into questions a lot of things about by that. And anyways, yeah. Socialist and Soviet Eastern Bloc countries were fast to take credit for the alleged eradication of polio, giving credit to good governing of their centralized compulsory mass vaccinations and systems approach public health, while blaming the West's higher rate of polio cases on our love of free trade capitalism, or as they put it, our love for economic hardship. That's the perspective that they put all this shit out in. That's the context that all this stuff was being put out in. At the very least, to this day, the central narrative and evolutionary dogma of polio vaccines, and vaccines in general, across the board, not to mention public health at large, are entirely founded on the propaganda and evolutionary politics of advancing revolutionary postmodern collectivist social change. You don't have to look any farther than Nacho's advancing public narrative for health and equity, social justice, or the social science of One Health, codifying all the tenets of socialist revolution into centralized, overarching global governance public health laws worldwide that's since been universally adopted worldwide, including by our very own federal government, our CDC, and Health and Human Services, and yes, including under Trump. Nacho's narrative for health and equity and social justice and the social science of One Health. But this is Nacho. I don't know if you know who Nacho is. This is advancing public narrative for health, equity, and social justice. Nacho is the National Association of County and City Health Officials. It's a national organization of local county health officials. And the county health officials, I don't know what they are in other states, but the county health officials are just subsidiaries of New York State Department of Health. They're quasi-sovereign. They say they're county level, but they're really run by the state. Like Cuba County Health Department. And it's just basically a derivative of the New York State Health Department. Let me see. Yeah, Nacho, this is 2018 they came out with this. And you can't read down through this. This is a policy that they're pushing. Nacho is pushing. These public health agencies, state, county public health agencies, are pushing this shit. Health equity and social justice. That's social revolution. That's tenets of social revolution, not medical health, or that's the social context. You got the dominant public narratives. See, public narratives, dominant public narratives in public health. Subverting dominant public narratives. Let's just go here for a second. Let me see what we've got here. Okay. Subverting dominant narratives. I ain't kidding you. Subverting dominant narratives asks us to dig deeply into long-held assumptions in a web of meaning mostly invisible, unexpressed, and taken for granted. This is challenging, but also hopeful and empowering, and we can learn to become active as narrative strategists responsive to social injustice. Obstacles arise in subverting narratives because the structures and systems of economic and political power in which they operate are not often consciously experienced. So this is where we get into implicit bias shit. Okay, it's not learned experience, it's implicit bias, because you've been living in the whiteness of America, or the white supremacy of America's inherent white supremacy is the accusatory. That you can't see and understand anything outside the context of that inherent white supremacy. You can't. You can't. Because you're racist. Because you're white. That's the academic accusatory of the Marxian academic accusatory of implicit bias. As expressions of power, narratives can support or contradict embedded beliefs, but rarely lead to a thorough examination of the stories that underlie the justification for these structures of power. Below is a description of some linked blah, blah, blah. Okay, but anyways. Dominant narratives underwrite social divisions and drive wedges among racial groups, workers, genders, and other groups that they do not see their common concerns. But I've read down through this. You can't go down through this. It reads just like any other socialist, communist, world socialist doctrine. Exercise dog whistle politics, racial codes, and the discourse of racism. Colorblind. This is all. It was all big just a few years ago. This is the stuff that they were pushing to the inmates back in 2000. They were pushing this 15 years ago. 20 years ago, they were pushing this shit in the prisons through curriculums called Race, Space, and Place. I've gone over it on a couple shows. I did a show called In the Defense of America Against the Whiteness Accusatory. I did a couple of In Defense of America shows against some of these collectivist accusatories, and this is these same accusatories that have become synonymous with public health, synonymous with state and county government public health agencies that are agents of the revolution. They're not there for our health. They're there as agents of the revolution, pushing the system's approach of public health as it became the envy of the world during polio mass vaccinations and Stalin and post-Stalin era Soviet virology. identifying and subverting narratives that support social and economic inequality. Our founding principles, capitalism, free enterprise, supposedly, according to the narrative of social tenets, that they support social and economic inequality. Because we're communism, you got to see communism promises equal outcome. But what you need to understand is, yes, when you're free to do what you need to do, you're going to have people that accomplish things at different rates or in different speeds or in different areas, equally, in different areas. Communism promises equal outcome. You got to, like I said before, the communist lawn isn't fully established until every blade of grass has been mowed to the same height. Every blade of grass. And as soon as one blade of grass sticks up a little bit, it's mowed down. But this is it. This is the tenets of world socialism, all of them. All the accusatories that come down through critical theory, critical race theory, rolled into public health as one, are one with public health, in that Nacho's advancing public health, public narratives for health, equity and social justice. And One Health is the same thing. One Health is the same thing. One Health Commission, okay? Yeah, One Health Commission believes that the social sciences are essential. The social sciences are essential to understanding and addressing the root causes of disease and the determinants of community health. The social determinants of community health. Of course, you got to have social determinants. You got to have environmental play. Your environment, the social environment, which I went over in my past few shows, is one and the same with the evolutionary biology and the narratives that come down through that. The social determinants. That's why a lot of Marxists are pushing for the environmental aspect of heredity, evolution, right? They're rolling socialism into the science. It can't be understood outside the context of the socialism and collectivism that it is, without an understanding of how sociological, remember sociology, queen of all sciences, through which the planners get to decide what, if any, value they have to society, or it's how they're going to be utilized toward the eventual end of the evolution of human society towards that single global human organism. That's what it is. Without an understanding of how sociological, cultural, economic, demographic, historical, linguistic, geographical, political, and other social dimensions contribute to health, society will be limited in achieving it for all. Social science disciplines are critical to making One Health the default way of doing business at all levels of research, academia, policy, and government. Literally, in just roots itself into every system, roots itself into every pillar of our republic. Therefore, a One Health social science initiative was launched in 2017 to provide a platform for innovation and integration of all social science disciplines to strengthen the One Health movement. Which all got its start, all got its run, its premise from the Soviet virology out of, the encephalitis, tick-borne encephalitis back in the Soviet Union in the 30s. I think it was the 1930s, right? Under Stalin, of which MP Chumakov, Mikhail Chumakov, Konstantin Chumakov's father, was actually a part of. And the bullshit virology that's been shown to be bullshit virology, that this is all premised on. So this isn't any more bullshit. This isn't any more science than any of that. From an objective science perspective, or definitely not from a liberty perspective, this is the advancement of socialist revolution. It's all it is. It's nothing else but the advancement of socialist revolution and the tenets of revolutionary socialism as public health, population health, one health. That's where we are, right? And they've adopted by all the countries. They were the envy of the world. The World Health Organization adopted all these things that Russia was able to implement at a command and control, a centralized command and control. You know, our own CDC. U.S. government releases first national One Health plan to protect people, animals, and our environment from shared health threats. Just out of curiosity. Well, they don't put the word social in here. But it's the same frickin' One Health. Because the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the Department of the Interior today released the first ever national One Health framework to address zoonotic diseases and advance public health preparedness in the United States. Public health preparedness. This was in January of 2025, arguably before Trump took office. Right? Arguably. A couple days before. But did he rescind it? I don't know. Did Jay Bhattacharya, did they rescind any of this? Federal One Health coordination. This came out in February 14th of 2025, about a month after Trump was president. CDC works closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Interior, and many other federal agencies to exchange information and coordinate One Health activities across the United States government. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you, medical freedom movement. Right? Thank you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thank you, Jay Bhattacharya. Yeah. What I'm saying is that it's not just the left, it's not just Democrats, it's the frickin' Republicans, it's the right. Well, actually, the old left, the Democrats, are now the new right. Even Trump was a Democrat, right? I mean, but the whole Democrat-Republican argument, the whole left-right argument is, it's valid nowhere. It's valid nowhere outside, I don't know, probably social media, about the only place that it's valid anymore. Doesn't matter. Either way, under Biden, under Trump, they've accepted the world socialism and the tenets of world socialist revolution, and they're promoting it as agents of the world socialism via One Health. They're doing it. The knowledge brokers, okay, and fact checkers of COVID area lockdowns, mandates, centralized social contract protocols, and coerced mass vaccinations couldn't possibly have ever come to fruition without an infiltrated, institutionalized collectivism in both our government and the mindset of we the people ourselves. That's what I'm saying. None of that whole lockdown and COVID would have been able to happen if, to at least some degree, we haven't adopted, as a people, adopted the mindset of world socialist mindset. we have been undergoing this fundamental transformation for 200 years now. I mean, the transcendentalists were writing shit out there about the Hydra. In the 1936 is when Robert Dale Owen wrote his Declaration of Mental Independence, which basically declared the family, we call them the three-headed hydra of capitalism, God, and family. It was a three-headed hydra that must be destroyed in America, but it was also religion, marriage, and property. The same thing. That was in 1836, so we're not too far. We're pretty close to 200 years from that point. Them transcendentalists were around before that even, Yeah, they couldn't have done it, is what I'm getting at, right? In conclusion, the collectivism, world socialism, communism, and top-down central plan and command and control realities intrinsic to the system's approach, okay, of Soviet Eastern Bloc public health would come to be the proverbial technocratic wet dream of Western and American politics, science, medicine, and the whole of our progressive education and academia, which, if you look at it, it become intrinsic to our politics, intrinsic to science and academia, which a couple shows ago I did this. It's the triple helix. It's the triple helix. Our fundamental understanding of everything, our fundamental understanding of what public health is now from the perspective of the tenets of socialist revolution, world socialist revolution. Essentially communism, right? Do we understand anything outside the communist perspective anymore, or a communist context anymore? Do we understand anything, even our founding principles? I mean, I can't get away from it. I can't get away from it. Let me see. Just turn on my phone here just for a second. I got my phone apps, right? I got this thing on here. It's right. Where the heck is it? Shit. It's right here. Right? See this little circle right there? And click that. Look at this. Take action now. Poverty, inequality, climate change. Turn your phone into a force for good. Support the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Every tap brings us closer to a sustainable world. Support the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Take action on poverty. I mean, can't get away from it. I didn't put that on my phone. It's everywhere, right? These same tenets are now public health. Same shit. Same shit. The triple helix. Same shit. All right. On an important side note, there is another large-scale field trial, 7 million plus, that was conducted in Poland using Hillary Kaprowski's, other than Sabin and Chumakov, there was another one, Hillary Kaprowski's live polio vaccine sometime around 1958. And around 1958, Hillary Kaprowski was doing his deal in Poland. Also a oral vaccine, I think. Kaprowski, who is still praised for testing his oral polio vaccine on himself, also tested his polio vaccine on quote-unquote volunteer mentally retarded kids at a New York State Hudson Valley institution in 1947. Yeah, Kaprowski was also in Brazil on yellow fever vaccines with the Rockefeller Foundation, by the way. Another coincidence. Meanwhile, yellow fever continues to have reemergence problems in Africa and South America that are getting blamed on globalization. I shit you not, they're blaming capitalism. Not that the vaccines are bullshit, or the epidemiology is bullshit, or the virology is bullshit, or the science is bullshit. but because of capitalism. Or as it were, the worldwide spread of capitalism. Yellow fever origin, epidemiology, preventative strategies, and future prospect. Strategies, sorry. I can't say that word for some reason. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Abstract. Yellow fever virus still represents a major threat in low-resource countries in both South America and Africa, despite the presence of an effective vaccine. Yellow fever outbreaks are not only due to insufficient vaccine coverage for insufficient vaccine supply. Yellow fever outbreaks are not only due to insufficient vaccine coverage for insufficient vaccine supply, but also to the increase in people without a history of vaccination living in endemic areas. Globalization continuous population growth, overpopulation, urbanization associated with inadequate public health infrastructure, and climate change constitute important promoting factors for the spread of this virus to tropical and subtropical areas and mosquito-infested regions capable of spreading the disease. Blaming globalization, which is global spread of capitalism. Yeah, privatization, for-profit motives, all right? Hillary Kaprowski has also been on the radar of Mark Kulak, who's satanic. You can find more info on him there, right there. Hillary Kaprowski's right there. Right there. He's got a whole page on him. He's got a whole page on him. You can get more information on that there. You have the collectivist tenets of how have the collectivist tenets of socialist revolution come to be the contingent, fundamental, foundational understanding implicit to not only our understanding of temporary public health and public health laws, but to pretty much everything we think and know. It's not a question of hyperbole. It's where we are. From the get-go, the evolutionary elitism and internationalist beginnings of scientific global governance and the world citizenship of cosmopolitanism. Okay? From the get-go, the evolutionary elitism and internationalist beginnings of scientific global governance and or the world citizenship of cosmopolitanism. Both the gene-based and coevolutionary epigenetics of Lamarckian and Lamarckian-Lysenkoism, right? Evolution, heredity is environmentally. Epigenetic, post-genetics, not just the genes, but the environment, the social environment. Okay, remember. Yeah, both the gene-based and coevolutionary epigenetics, post-genetics of Lamarckian Lysenkoism, to the universal Darwinism and punctuated equilibrium of Marxist socialist revolution are all one contiguous, that is unbroken, philosophy and train of thought. This is where I'm getting. This is where I'm getting at. You know? You get sidetracked with the arguments between all this shit. The academia that presents it as all contending shit. It's all one and the same. Okay. Yeah. And right smack dab in the middle, of our fundamental transformation from a free society to a collectively enslaved one is the social science and systems approach, collectivism of public health. It's always there. At every given opportunity, public health is there. The public health narrative is there. The system approach narrative is there. The social sciences approach is there. The health equity public health narrative is there. As an official U.S. government policy, even, right? Under Trump, even. Thank you, medical freedom movement, right? Somebody ringing the bell?
What?
Somebody ring the bell?
Not on purpose.
Okay, yeah. Collectively, so right smack in the dab in the middle of our fundamental transformation from a free society to a collectively enslaved one is the social science and systems approach, collectivism of public health. First offered to the world on a grand scale via epidemics born in the jumping virology and top-down command and control, simultaneous mass vaccinations that they necessitate that became the envy of the central planning elites of after polio the world over. Before being adopted by them all, including the World Health Organization and the U.S. You know? Has it even been noticed that these epidemics and population public health narratives that accompany them, polio being chief among them, have by far won revolutionary world socialism its greatest leaps forward? Pun intended. Right? This is where I'm going to go. I'm going to leave off here on this question. You know, has it ever been noticed that these epidemics, you know, including polio, right? Starting with polio majorly, right? And population public health narratives that accompany them, polio being chief among them, have by far won revolutionary world socialism its greatest leaps forward. You know, just a question. Because from where I can see it, from the liberty perspective and from the research that I've been doing and reading, if you look at it and you see it from a liberty perspective, from our founding principles perspective, the threat that the advancement of these public health narratives means, or it is, to our founding republic and our constitution and our limited form of government, our liberty, our freedom, and our dignity as individuals. This is where I'm at. I'm trying to lay this out there for your consideration. I'm putting all this documenting all this. I'm going to go over some more evidence to what I'm putting out there in the next couple shows. It's going to take me a couple shows to get through, but I'm going to lay it out there for your consideration. I appreciate you stopping by the Liberty Perspective today. I hope you're getting something out of this. I hope you're getting something out of it. But we'll take this up in our next show, and we'll continue this, and we'll continue laying this out. And I'm telling you, I'm not making this shit up. That's all I can say. Thanks for stopping by the Liberty Perspective. I'm Joe Marshall. See you on the next show. Thank you.